Welcome to EDU World Space.
Problem 8.39. We've got Jack and Jill, who apparently haven't learned anything about safety from their infamous hill adventure, on a frozen pond where we can neglect friction. Jack is sliding to the east towards Jill, who's stationary, and for this, since Jack and Jill both begin with J's, we're going to call them A and B. Anyway, he collides with her, and then we're told that he goes off at 5 meters per second, 34 degrees north of east, and we want to figure out what poor Jill's velocity is, its magnitude and direction. So because we can neglect the friction of the ice, this is a conservation of momentum problem. So to begin with, only Jack is moving. So it's his mass times his initial speed, and we'll call this direction X and this direction Y. And then after they've run into each other, we know that Jack is moving at his final speed, and then for the X component, it's going to be the cosine of theta. And I should not forget his mass, because this is momentum. And then Jill's momentum X component goes there. So Jack's final momentum, his Y component, Y component should have the sign. And then the Y component of Jill's momentum for the Y direction. And so for the sake of not trying to solve an entire vector equation all at once, we can break it into two equations, and solving those for the X and Y components of Jill's speed, or the components of her velocity rather, we find that this is going to be the ratio of his mass to her mass times the change in his speed, or in the relevant change, the change in the relevant component of his speed. So BF. No, sorry, it's the negative of the change, because you subtract the final from the initial as opposed to vice versa. Minus EAF cosine theta. Now this works out to be 4.42 meters per second. The Y component of Jill's velocity. Same story here, except because there's nothing in the Y component of Jack's initial velocity, we just go straight to it being negative. And this is going to be negative 3.2 meters per second. So the magnitude of Jill's velocity is going to be the same old formula for the magnitude of a vector that has always been the case. This case it only has two components, or you could think of it as having a third, which is 0, because they remain on the surface of the frozen pond at all times. And so her speed is 5.46 meters per second. And then, so the tangent of her angle is going to be the y component divided by the x component. And the angle then will be the arctangent of that ratio. And her angle will end up being 35.9 degrees south of east. So as we've drawn here sort of intuitively, and then we saw also the y component is negative. So that lets us know that this should be south of east. And hopefully this time they will learn something about safety and not keep getting themselves into these situations.